Okay, welcome. Let me see if the chat works. Okay, good. So let me share the screen and start the lecture. Okay, great. I'll try to keep the chat, an eye over the chat, but if you want to ask a question, you can also unmute yourself and ask the question.
I can't hear this guy.
Can you hear
Audio
me?
on the bottom.
I can hear somebody saying that they cannot hear me. Let me look at the chat and see if you can all see me. Okay, great. So let me start. What I want to teach you how to do is how to do payments online. So using the Stripe API. Stripe has a nice documentation. Yeah, this is my shopping site. So I opened an account just for the purpose of the class. You can open one too as well, as long as you only use it in trial mode. Oh yeah, great. And so now you see the keys. That was perhaps not ideal. But yeah, right, it populates everything with my keys. Okay, fine, it doesn't really matter because these are test keys. But you can sign up to Stripe and then you can look at the documentation and you can look at the various APIs. And we are going to use the Python API from the server and obviously the JavaScript API from the website. And the site I'm going to build looks like this. So what is this window there? Okay, it's a preview of something. So here I'm keeping an eye over the network because in general it will be useful. But the site works in this way. If I go to the shop, I can buy stuff. I can buy one cowboy hat, and then I can buy 2 colanders. No, 2 is enough. Okay, so at this point I have 2 items in the shopping cart. Here I decided to simply list as this number the number of different items. But if I go in the cart, I see that I'm gonna buy 1 of these and 2 of that. Okay, so I see the total amount I can pay. And this is a test API, so we can enter some address, to get the shipment. Then we can enter credit card number, and if you are in testing mode, 42424242 is the classic credit card number to enter. Okay, and we click on pay, and this simply says, okay, fine, we paid. We can look at the purchase outcome, and we see that there is a 200 okay, and that the response is sorry, 1 second. The response is an okay, so that tells us that, that it went fine. I wonder if can I shrink this chat? Yeah, okay, good. And if I look at actually the logs, I can see here that it logs a bunch of stuff on the server and that the charge was successful. So this indicates that the credit card was accepted. So essentially Stripe has a test mode in which it gives you a pair of keys that are in test mode. And then if you really activate it, you go into production mode in which you get production keys that are actually supposed to be linked to a bank account. And in that way, you can actually process real credit cards, okay? And Stripe, if you go into the production mode, it does some checks on you. It checks that you are a real person. You may want to verify your either social security number or if it's a corporation, your EIN, your employer identification number, which is the equivalent of an SSN if you open a corporation. And then you can connect bank accounts to it, and you can essentially do the whole administration portion, which works really quite well. I'm looking at the chat, so if you want to ask questions at any time, you can just type it on the chat, okay? So first of all, why is Stripe so awesome? Because normally, if you want to process credit card payments, in the good old times, if you wanted to be a credit card merchant, not like the sandwich shop on the corner that buys somebody else's equipment, but like a website that processes their own payments, really, you needed to abide by very many rules that are set up by the banking regulations. So in order to be authorized to process credit cards, you have to have a certain number of audits and documents on file. You have to have some certain number of security procedures on file. And in order to obtain all the required clearances, the process, last I knew, costed a few tens of thousands of dollars. So it was definitely something that was a barrier to entry. And what Stripe did is a web service that essentially is between the website and the credit card, so that the website that uses Stripe never sees the full credit card information and does not need to complete this expensive audit. Essentially, when a user uses Stripe to buy a product from a website, the credit card information is sent directly to Stripe, and Stripe simply sends to the website some information that will authorize the purchase. Okay, so that the website knows that the transaction went through, and it can essentially, mark the products as bought and then mark them for shipping to the customer. So, so how does this code work? So this site is very simple. It has a I put together something super quick to manage products. I put together some instead a better page for buying things, and then I put together a page where you can you see now the shopping cart is empty because I completed the purchase previously, and then I put together a mechanism for viewing the shopping cart. This is actually an interesting mechanism. You see, to you, it looks as if there are two pages. I can, add a cowboy hat. Then this is my shopping cart. I can continue shopping. It seems that there are two pages, but actually there is only one. Okay, you see that I'm always in default index. So let's look a moment at how I did that, and then let's look at the details of the Stripe setup. Again, if you have questions, attendance yet? No. Yeah, right. I should ask for attendance, but I think I'll ask on Thursday. The truth is that I ran into a bit of trouble preparing this class because of some strange library dependency with Stripe. So I was, chasing the right version of libraries for quite a while. Something that you don't have to do, I guess. So in this app, okay, but it's good that I comment on that because I want to show you what I do. So when you need modules that are specific to a particular web app, you put them into modules, which is this directory. So here you see that I put a whole lot of them. Okay. So what I did is essentially in my window that in order to install them, I did the following. I did essentially these comments. Let me enlarge the font. Pip install Stripe T modules. This will install the Stripe modules in the subdirectory modules. The other thing that I had to do is pip install pip install requests. No, actually, sorry, the other was these requests. So the Stripe modules are the Stripe API, and the requests module are a library called requests in order to do HTTP calls from the browser, okay? The result is that if I look in modules, many modules were installed, all of these, ASN1 crypto, certify, CFFI, HRDET, cryptography, yada yada, okay, up to URL lib. So when you say pip install requests, this installs the requests library that you can see here, but it also installs all the dependencies, okay? And so some of these packages have been installed because they are dependencies either of Stripe or of requests or of one of the other libraries, okay? So I checked these all in, so these should work as part of what you download, right? I'm working in a branch called cart stripe single page. You can see the name there at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to follow and download the code, you can do essentially git fetch, which updates your repository, and then git checkout cart stripe single page, and this will put you, I can do it, but to me it doesn't leave me anywhere else because I'm already there. But these two commands should put you into the branch I have been using. Okay. So how does the site work? So first of all, I have a Vue div, okay, and then I do something that is a trick that I always find kind of useful. I have a Vue variable called page. This is a normally defined Vue variable. It is defined here in the Vue object, okay? Page is equal to prod at the beginning, but it can have two values. It can have value prod, okay, or value cart. So I use this variable as a trick to show two different pages in what is in reality the same page. You see that when I am on the website here, if I look at the cart, I see one thing, and if I look at continue shopping, I see another, right? I have two pages. These two pages are produced simply by toggling the variable of this variable page. So my page has a simple structure. It has divs that correspond to which page I'm seeing, okay? And by switching the div, sorry, let me make the font a bit larger. By switching the div, by switching the value of the variable, I can decide to see one or the other page. Okay, this is a trick that is really quite useful. Okay, so I have two pages, one for products and one for the shopping cart. The products page by this point should be quite simple. You see, I have a v-for that loops all over the products for each product in products, okay? And then for each product, I display the product name, the product price, then I display the quantity in stock. Then I have some buttons used to increment the desired quantity or by 1 or by -1. These are the plus and -1 buttons, okay? I do a single call for these two buttons. I just call it inc desired quantity with 1 or -1 as argument, okay? I display the desired quantity, etc., etc. And then there is a byproduct button which puts what you have displayed in the shopping cart, okay? So let's look at how does it work putting something in the shopping cart. It's, I think, the one interesting thing here. The rest you can just read it. Putting something in the shopping cart works by calling a byproduct, which calls the self byproduct, which is here. So what I do is this: I fish out the product you want to buy. And then, I have a choice, and I'm not sure I did the right choice, but I want to explain you what the possibilities are and the logic I followed. So if you already have, say, a cowboy hat in the shopping cart, when you want to buy 2 more, does it get added to what you have in the shopping cart, or does it replace the order for maybe 3 that you might have before in the shopping cart with an order of 2? So in this case, I check whether it's found. If it's not already present, I simply say self vo cart push p. So the cart is simply a list of products. Okay. And then what I do is that I update the cart quantity, okay, with a desired quantity. Okay, so the cart will contain products that have this cart quantity that is the desired quantity that you want to buy. And then I call this update cart and store cart. Update cart is a boring method. I forgot what it does exactly, but I think it simply enumerates the elements in the cart so that I can refer to them. Let me check what it does. Oh no, it does something else. Yes, but it also computes the total price of what I want to buy. Okay, it also computes this cart total, which is the total price of what I want to buy. Okay, so update cart essentially does some indexing of it, but then it computes the total price. These are, nothing new in really compared to what you have been doing already. Okay, it's simply maintenance of being able to put products in a cart. Now, store cart is a little bit more interesting. Where is it? Store cart, I wrote it here. So I want to essentially store what I have in the shopping cart so that if you refresh the page, okay, what you have in the cart is still there. You see, I can refresh the page and I can look again at the shopping cart and it's there. So where do I put this information? There are various places where I could put it. One is I could write it to the server. Here I decided, just as a variation, to put it into another place, to write it in the client, that is, to write it in your browser. Just to show you an example of how this can be done. It turns out that modern browsers have this object that is called local storage. Local storage is an object. So I think that somewhere I checked that that it can be accessed. I forgot where. Maybe I don't check because I'm kind of sure that it can be accessed. But essentially, local storage is an object that works like like any object. You can define fields to it, and you can read the value of fields. And so I like the fields of local storage to be always strings. Okay, and so this local storage is storage that will in the end be in your own browser. So let me show you what this means. See, this is the app. If I go there using another browser, for example, I had a Firefox available somewhere, okay? If I go there, my cart is empty on Firefox, okay? Because the content of the cart is stored in Chrome, so that here I have one element in the shopping cart, but is not stored in Firefox, okay? The storage is local. So what I do in order to store these is that I say local storage.cart is equal to json.stringify of self-vo cart. So I take my cart object defined in vo, I convert it to a string, and I set it to the cart field of local storage. When I want to read the cart content, okay, I simply say, well, if I have a cart defined, then I parse the string and assign it to self-bookart so that it will initialize it properly. If I don't have any cart defined, then I define my cart to be the empty list. Not the empty object, really, because you see, the cart for me is a list of products. Okay? So I'm using this storage. Now you can ask, is it a good idea to use a local storage of our shopping cart? Probably yes, or probably not. I'm not quite sure. When I use Amazon, if I'm logged in from any one of my browsers, of course, I can see my shopping cart. If I'm not logged in, then not. So this is really a little bit to your choice, right? Do you want the shopping cart to be a global property across all methods that a user has to access your site? Or do you want the shopping cart to be local to each browser instance that is looking at the site? It's your choice. Okay, so this is how I store the cart and read it afterwards. Now, the interesting part is the payment part, really. That is the one really new and interesting piece that there is to it. So this works as follows. When I look at the cart, there is this pay button. The icon is just an icon from Font Awesome. And let's look at what happens when I click it. Okay, so what happens when I click it is that it opens this sort of modal window. Okay, let's look at how this is done, actually. The next homework, in any case, will be on Stripe. So I see that you're talking about homework in the chat. So, part of the reason I'm covering it is this. So that, one can essentially build the payments in the tool. Okay, so let's look at the HTML. This is the cart. Okay, this is a pay button with a credit card logo on it. And when you click on it, you run the pay method. Okay? So when you run the pay method, this is a function that gets run. Okay, and so you do the following. Yeah, I see that you asked for an extension, but let's talk about what I'm doing first, and then we can talk about other stuff at the end of the lecture, okay? So there is the pay function, and it does as follows. It opens an instance of Stripe instance. Stripe instance is an object that I have initialized here, okay? So the Stripe checkout is the Stripe library. Yes, I really need to go from the beginning to explain you how this works. So in my index.html, I load not only the other libraries, but also the checkout library by Stripe. Okay, this library, I don't need to write it in my own JavaScript. I load it actually from the Stripe site, so that it's always up to date. Okay, this checkout library defines a checkout object. So when I am in my index here, I can do the following. I can say that my Stripe instance is a Stripe checkout in which I configure my public key, a logo, which is simply an image that gets displayed on the Stripe checkout thingy, and then this is a function, okay, that essentially is used. It's named in a very confusing way. It took me a moment to understand what this is doing. But this is essentially called in order to send the data to server, and it's given a token and some arguments. Okay, so and it can call your function to call the data to the server. Okay, so this is a configuration that you do at the beginning. Essentially, you have to tell Stripe the key, an image, okay, fine, and then a function to which it will pass a token, and it's your duty then to send the data to the server. Okay, so when you send the data to the server, okay, so let me actually do a bit of drawing to explain you what goes on here. Okay. So click on pay. This is what begins everything. Okay, you click on pay. So Stripe opens modal dialog. You input in modal dialog. Stripe, maybe I should write Stripe checkout. No, this library opens a modal dialog. You input in modal dialog the credit card number, address, if any, etc. Okay. Stripe checkout sends from the modal dialog the information to Stripe. Stripe checks your credit card, does whatever it wants. Okay, this means it does a lot of other checks that your transaction is not likely to be illegal or fake or, you know, fraud, etc., and gives your site a token back. Okay, then Stripe checkout calls the token method that you specified in the Stripe instance. Okay, that method is in charge of telling the server what you bought, how much it costed, the all important token which authorizes the purchase. Okay, so there is this somewhat strange organization of the code in which you need to specify this function that is unfortunately called token, that takes a token as argument. So you need to specify statically, essentially, this function which is in charge of communicating with the server. And when you buy something, there is this little dance that goes on. Okay, your credit card data goes to Stripe. Stripe validates it and then sends a token, this token argument, back to the web UI. Okay, and the web UI then calls this function here. Okay, in order to communicate with the server. And so what I do here is that I set a couple of things, a couple of variables, and I do the main task in send data to server. Okay, so the reason why this is done in this way is this: Stripe wants to avoid you having any credit card information. So when you fill in the credit card information, that is sent to Stripe, and all you have back is this token. Okay, and this token is then sent to the server. Now, once let me show you this send data to server function in detail. I've set up I set these two variables. Okay, I don't know why. I could also have passed them as arguments to send data to server, I guess. The only reason for doing this is that it made my code a little bit easier to debug because I could access the Stripe token value. Okay. So at this point, all I do here is I do a call to the server to a certain purchase URL, which is an API URL which I defined, in which I give it the customer information, because I want to know who is buying what, the transaction token, the Stripe token that comes from Stripe, and I also need to say the total amount that needs to be paid, and the cart consisting of the list of products that was bought. Okay, so I send all these to my server. Questions up to this point in how do I do this? Okay. So so this essentially passes the ball to the server to complete the purchase. Okay. What I do when the purchase comes back is very simple. I simply clear up the cart and clear up everything once the thing is done, so that you are ready to buy other things. Okay. So let me go over the browser flow again. Okay. Let me put a title here so that you can see it clearly. Browser flow. Okay. So you click on pay. When you click on pay, you call this, in which I open this instance. I can configure it to get the billing address and the shipping address, and I can specify the amount in cents. Okay. This part is run dynamically. This part is what you have to do in order to be able to define at runtime how much the user is paying. You define an instance here, and then you open it when you click on pay to open the dialog, right? Then once the user enters the credit card data, etc., the instance, the dialog sends the data to Stripe directly, and then upon return from the Stripe call, sorry, 1 second. Upon return from the Stripe call, it calls this function token, passing it a token and some arguments. The arguments is the customer information. The token is a Stripe token. I take note of both, and I send it to the server. Okay? Questions up to this point on what the browser does? Hello? Whoops, all caps. Okay, fine, but no questions. Is it all clear? Hey, no, not privately. I don't want to write privately. Where is everybody? Everyone. Yeah. Okay, clear here, thanks. Okay, good. So this is the first part. I apologize, I do just a last summary. Because it was very counterintuitive to me how to set up this up the first time. You define your Stripe instance statically, and this Stripe instance contains the key and the function to be called once everything goes through. You open the Stripe instance once you know how much the user has to pay. So you can define the amount, the billing address that you want it, the shipping address that you want it, etc., okay? Well, then this will talk to Stripe, come back, with a token and arguments. You write the token and arguments, call your own function to send the data to the server, and here you actually send everything to the server. What is the Stripe token used for? Yes, very good. I will explain in a moment. Now I go to the second part of the story, okay? So the second part of the story is this purchase function. So here, note that I do this little bit of dance in order to read my Stripe key information out of my private file. Okay, so let me write here what happens on the server. On the server, okay, so we get above call with token, price pay, like cart, and total to be paid. Okay, so now here is a problem. You know, that's why the token is used. One question for you: suppose I'm the server and I get this call, right? You see that that here I'm getting the token and the amount. So can I be happy and conclude the transaction? The answer is no, because if you have the server and you get this call above call from browser, okay? If you have the server and get this call from the browser, you don't actually know that the call is legitimate, right? Because somebody could have hacked their own server, maybe installing I apologize. Somebody could have modified their own browser, perhaps adding an extension, causing it to send to the server you know, a confirmation containing a fake token, right? The payload to the server will look like, maybe I even have it somewhere here to show you, but the payload to the server looks something like this. Yeah, this is it. So there is this thing, there is the amount you paid, the customer information, etc., etc., and here there is also somewhere a token. Okay, this is a token actually. I apologize, it doesn't look great because I think I resized the window, and so, okay, yeah, that's the token. Okay. But it could be fake, right? Because the token that you get from the web UI, I mean, the token you get from the browser could have been falsified. I mean, it could be invented by a browser extension and sent to you to make you believe that that the user really paid and entered a credit card number. But maybe it's all fake, you know? If you just get these from a browser, you don't know at all that legitimate credit card information was ever sent. Okay? So at this point, we need to verify that the token is legitimate. Okay, we send it to Stripe along with our private server key. Okay, and along with the total to be charged to the card. Okay. Stripe will tell us whether the transaction is okay or not. Okay. So this is actually, let me write it somewhere so that we can, I can put it up in the class. So this code is performed here essentially. I get here I am in the server, and I get then I go over the details, but basically I get the token and I get the amount, and I build a Stripe charge object, okay, in which I specify the amount, the token. It's called the token ID, but it's simply because I mean, this is actually the token. It's only that these are stupid inconsistencies in namings. But when Stripe gives me the token is actually a dictionary containing a bunch of stuff, and the ID is what is actually the token. Everything is called token. You have understood. It's one of these APIs that is has names that are a little bit confusing. Okay, and I can give it a description. The description will appear, you know, in my list of Stripe transactions. So for example, in CrowdGrader, it would be like a student subscription or whatever it is. Here I simply say purchase. Maybe I could write a better message. I could write purchase by and then put to the user who is purchasing or whatever I want, right? But so essentially, this thing here is what causes Stripe to actually deduct money from the credit card. And if this actually does a network call, and this is why I had to install the requests library and also the Stripe library. Both are used by this thing here. So this doesn't look like a network call, but it is a network call. It talks to Stripe, validates the token, and says, please charge this to the credit card. And if this is all done, okay, what do I do? Well, I log that the charge was successful, and then these because I want to be quick, but I simply have a customer order database in which I insert the customer information, the transaction token, in case I want to keep track of it, and the content of the card. This is done in a hurry. Maybe I can clean up this information a little bit, okay, but this gives me the full information about the transactions that went on. And then I return that everything is okay. I want to show you one kind of funny thing in all these. So here you define already the amount to pay in the web interface, right? This is what causes when I click here. Okay. Oh boy. You see that this is $24.99, right? This $24.99 is set here in JavaScript. And then you should be a little bit surprised that on the server, there is again an amount to pay. So this is something that I always found a little bit funny. I can actually present to the user a button that confirms the payment for $24.99, and on the server, I can actually charge you a different amount of money. This to me is really quite funny. And in fact, so yeah, I can use faking for development. So in fact, I'm using test tokens that Stripe gave me. Stripe gives you a test private key, a test public key, and that enables you to develop all the code and enter fake credit card numbers for 242, etc. And it all perfectly works. Then the moment in which everything is ready, you simply replace the private, the test keys with the public keys, and from that moment on, the transactions are real transactions on real credit cards. Okay, so it's very nicely done. It's very easy to test your Stripe integration. But what I wanted to tell you is this: that even though in the web UI I have this like pay $24.99, actually the server can charge anything it wants. In fact, in CrowdGrader, the very first time I set it up, you know, this student subscription, pay $1.99. Because everything is written in cents, I made a mistake and I multiplied by 100 twice. So I charged the per student $199. Okay, on the server. The web UI was giving the student a confirmation that they were about to click for $199, and instead I billed them $199. Okay, so needless to say, I refunded it, and it's very easy in Stripe to go to the list of transactions and refund them. You know, one of the reasons you need to store the token is that that I do here. Okay, among the transaction token, is that it makes it very easy to refund the transactions later, and you can read the the API that Stripe does. But essentially, instead of creating a charge, I think you can create a refund, okay? And that would refund the user. But why Stripe gives you this ability to actually charge a different amount than the one that has been agreed in the UI is something that I really don't know. Okay, but it is done this way. So if we go to look at the list of orders, okay, there will be a lot of junk here, but we can view one of these orders. I don't know, the latest one, I guess. Maybe we just order in this way. Okay, and here I start to match information, but you see that there is customer information that was entered by the user in the UI. Okay, and then there is the information about the transaction token, which actually includes a lot of information. It is the client IP address captured by Stripe, some timestamp in seconds since Unix time, the token. And then there is some information about the credit card that I used to pay, right? It gives me my last 4 digits. The last 4 digits are useful because you know, when you talk to a customer to do customer service, for example, the customer may tell you, hey, you know, can you please refund my charge? And so you can look up people by email address, right, that they entered, and then you can essentially say, oh, which purchase? Okay, can you verify the last 4 digits of the card so that you know that you are refunding it to the right card, etc., etc. You know, like it's usually done. Okay. And this is a card. Again, I could have stored the information in a nicer way. You have also noticed that I never decrement the amount of quantity I have on stock, right? This code that I wrote is very focused actually on doing the minimum possible, which is to teach you how to use the Stripe API. Okay, so summarizing, this is the sort of dance. There is a browser flow and then there is a server flow, both of them called Stripe. The browser flow essentially sends to Stripe the credit card information and gives back the browser a token. Then the token is given to the server, and then the server contacts Stripe once more to check that the token is legitimate and to conclude the charge to the credit card. Okay? That's all there is to it. Any questions so far? So among the less obvious pieces is this. Again, if I go to my code, okay, you can put in modules whatever you want to install that is particular to a particular Web2Py app. Okay, so if you want to install another module, you say pip install module, okay, target modules, okay, and this will put it into this modules directory. Okay, this is a very good way of doing it because then when you distribute your app in Web2Py, it will contain inside all the strange modules that you actually need to use. Okay. I think this is all. Oh, there is this other nifty technique that I want to again bring to your attention. The idea is to use index.html and to use in it a variable called page and toggling the value of the page variable in order to give you the impression of having pages, even though I'm writing, even though I'm actually writing a single HTML page. Okay, so the page is switched here. You know, when you click on view cart, there must be somewhere here. Oh well, I lost it actually. Where do we do that? Let me see a moment, okay? So if I am in shop, what happens when I push the cart button? The code is here. You see, I have a function that is called goTo. And if I say go to cart, it sets the value of the page to cart. And if I say go to prod, it sets the value of the page variable to prod. Here is the function goTo. The only thing it does is that if I go to the cart, it reinitializes the Stripe instance. Okay, but the main instruction is actually this one as the main statement. So I set the value of self-view page, and this has the effect of switching pages. So this means, if you let me play with it a moment, that you can basically, let me play with it in here. This means that you can use the following style if you want to build, if you want to build multiple pages into multiple logical pages into the single page. Suppose you want to build a one-page app that gives you different screens, right? You can do div vo if is equal to page is equal to cart or like page one, okay? And then you write the code and you say no div, and you can do these for all the pages you have, okay? So you can do things like these essentially, okay? And then by simply if you want to go to another page, at some point you have I don't know, a button, the on click is equal to go to page one, okay? Something like this. And this enables you to build something that looks to the user as if it has multiple pages, but the time to switch from one page to the other is instantaneous, okay? And so the experience is very much smoother. Also, the headers of the page do not change. Just let me show you the experience again. You see, when I go to the shopping cart, it's instantaneous, and the headers are not reloaded as when I do a page reload, right? In which there is a delay and everything gets reloaded. Here I'm basically simply telling Vue to show one or the other among two sets of information. Okay. Okay, so this is most of what I wanted to do on Stripe. Are there any questions on Stripe, or should I move to another topic? Okay, so since we have half an hour remaining, I want to show you how to do another one of these things that are not entirely obvious, okay? So this ends the part on Stripe. Let me change a branch of code in which I am. I need to find another branch of code to show you another one of the various techniques that I'm using. This is actually quite valuable. This technique is kind of trivial, but few people do it well. And so it's a nice trick that I'm gonna teach you. It's called the local time, the branch to get. So you have to do git fetch, git checkout, local time, Sorry, underscore, okay. Yeah. Sorry, this was me doing. One second, I need to check that everything. Okay, fine. Okay, sorry. Let me begin again. I had some, dirty file in my local. Okay. So you see, what I do is I move to a branch, and then I merge into it the changes that are only on the server. Okay, so now I have my new branch. So what I what I want to do now is this. I told you some time ago in the past that in the database you should always store time in UTC format, because the local time is very troublesome. Essentially, the local time is troublesome because it's a local time is not only a difference from UTC. It's not only, we are, what is it now, 7 hours ahead of UTC. But the local time is also all the rules that enable you to translate from UTC to local time throughout the year. So even though two cities can have the same difference from UTC, they may not be in the same time zone. Okay. In fact, the time zones, so there are not only like 24 or maybe 48 if you had one every half hour in the world, but you have like thousands, literally thousands, because there are time zones that depend on precisely when daylight savings time starts and ends in each place. So two places can have the same offset from UTC, say on June 1st, but be in different time zones because they have different rules for when daylight savings times starts and ends. And this is complicated by the fact that there are time zones that were in use maybe some decades ago and are no longer in use now. So if you have local times belonging to those time zones, you need to have some way of translating those times into local time into UTC. In short, it's a mess. So how do we solve this mess in a nice way? The nice way being, we want to store the UTC time in the database, but we want always to convert it to the local time of the user in the browser, okay? So this solution has various pieces. None of them is very complicated, but they work as follows. First of all, in this new site, okay, so let me reload this site. It will be a completely different site and it has an internal error, probably because I switched the databases too brutally. Yeah, right. Let me rather than waste time. Okay, so let me. Okay, now it should work. Wait. Let me log in. I need to sign up. Okay. I mean, you don't see very much happening, okay? But I want to show you the code. I wish I knew how to mute those stupid notifications. So the code begins here, essentially. I want for each user to be able to store their local time. If I go here and I go to my profile, you see that it has by default my local time, my time zone, and I can store it, or I could go to my profile again and say that in reality I could be in another zone, right? And I can choose whatever time zone I want. You see there are many time zones that have the same offset from UTC. For example, there is Gambia, Alaska, and Adak that are both 9 hours away in one direction. You know, it's very common. Okay, so how do I essentially add? There are two questions here. One is how do I add the user time zone to my profile? The native fields of the profile are these three, and I want to add a fourth. And the other related question is how do I initialize the user time zone to the proper value? Okay. Let's look at them one by one. In order to define other things, let me just kill some app because it's giving me too many notifications. Okay, hopefully. So you can add fields to the profile in this way. Sorry, I'm looking for the right line. Okay. You see, auth is the object that takes care of your login, right? And so you can say auth settings extra fields, and you can define other fields for tables. The auth user is the table that that has the profile in it. And so here you can put a list of fields that you want to add to the profile. Okay, so here I'm adding a field called user time zone. It's a string. And I will tell you in a moment how this my time zone nice detector widget works. Okay, this I will show it to you in a moment. But this is the way in which, in general, you can add fields to the profile. In fact, let me try to play with it, like field, I don't know, like a nickname, and this is a string. Okay, and if I do this, okay, and I go here, okay, now I can define a nickname which can be like Peter. Okay, so now my profile will also contain a nickname. Okay, very useful because you can store information about users there very nicely for when you build sites. Now the other problem is how do you detect the user time zone to define a useful initial value for these? So this is a silly problem, but because you would expect that a modern browser tells the server what is the time zone of the user. But this is not true, unfortunately. And so what I do is this. I have here in layout.html, I put the following piece of code. Okay. I have a variable that is called if is time zone unknown, in which case I don't know your time zone. If time is time zone unknown is set, then I do two things. I load a plugin time zone that somebody wrote, and I do and I run this function. Okay. Once the page is loaded, I put the time zone name in this variable, and I send it via GET request to the server. Okay? So essentially, I load this plugin in JavaScript, and then when the page is loaded, I call JSTZ determine. This determines the time zone. I put the name of the time zone here, and I send it in the server as a GET request. Let's see it happen first. Okay, so let me just look at the various network calls. Of course, let's see. Maybe if I log out, I will see it because now my time zone is known. Log out. Yeah, you see, this is a call to set time zone that was triggered. Name is America, Los Angeles. Okay. So this is a call that gets passed to the server. So how does how does this code work? How does the plugin work? Essentially, the browser does not tell you, the server, which one is its time zone, but it is able to translate local time into UTC time. Okay, and so somebody wrote an extension that very cleverly asks for the translation between many times. So for example, it starts by doing something like this. Okay, what time is it now in local time? And what time is it? And please translate it to UTC. So if you have that information, the JavaScript would start by knowing, aha, this is a time zone that in the month of May believes it is 8 hours or whatever it is away from UTC time. Good. Let's now try to see what is the offset on January 1st. And then it says something like, hey, please take local time of January 1st, 2020 at 12 p.m. and translate it to UTC. And give me both versions. And so by doing a sufficient number of these translations, it is able to figure out not only what the difference from UTC is, but also when it changes due to DST. And so by doing a sufficient number of tests, it can distinguish all the time zones. Once the time zones are detected, it is sent to the server. What does the server do with this information? Okay. The server does the following. This is the function called setTimeZone. And this, I get the time zone name, and I write it in the session. This is because I don't know if the user is logged in yet, right? The user may not logged in. It may be their first access, but I have captured their time zone. So the content of the session persists if the user logs in. There is only more information added upon login. So I can start to say session user time zone is equal to what the browser told me. And then I do the following. If the user is logged in, okay, what do I do? Sorry. Okay, this is a complicated code. You can read it, but essentially you can read what it's doing, but it's essentially trying to restore information. So when the user is present at the edit page, the translation is done according to UTC, but when the user is done editing, the user is done... Let me read this comment a moment. Yes, there is a very nasty bug that this eliminates, essentially. When you imagine... I mean, actually, let me return to this bug later. I think it's better that I tell it later to you. So once I know the time zone in the session, what do I do with it? Essentially, I define these validators and widgets that do the translation to and from the local time zone. Okay, these are put here. I define a UTC class, and then I do sorry. This is a validator, you know, like is int in range, and so I use is localized date time, okay? And this does essentially a translation, one via the method call and the other via the method formatter to and from local time, okay? You can read this code and don't want to walk over it with you, but essentially this does the translation in Web2Py, so that when you define a table of type date time and you define this validator is able to take what you have written in local time and store it in UTC, and on the other way around from the database, to take the value in UTC from the database and display it to you in local time. So this does the translation back and forward. And in the tables, in order to do that, you do as follows. I'm sorry, I'm getting lost in the code. 1 second. Here are the tables. You see, I can have a field that is a date time, and that has as validator this full date time validator that I define via my isLocalized date time function. Okay, so in general, Web2Py has this notion of how to translate, how to put information in and out of the database. So you can use validators not only to generate errors, but also to change the format of the information. Okay, and this is precisely what I'm doing here. You can read the various details. And here the only okay. No, yeah, I'm thinking, but I don't think I want to go into this bag in depth. It's a complicated thing. So essentially, what I want to show you is this. I wanted to show you the use of a plugin in order to signal. Sorry, I have too many things here. Where is my layout.html? I don't see it. So I use a plugin in order to detect the time zone in the browser. I use an AJAX GET request in order to communicate to the server. And when I communicate to the server, I do two things with it. I define the translation back and forth from local time. Okay, this via this isLocalized date time class that I wrote. This class works in the same way as isInteger in range, or isFloat in range, or isEmail, all the other validators of Web2Py, right? If you look at the documentation, all the video, all these validators have two methods that are important. One is the call method, okay, which does the translation from in one direction, from value in the browser to value in the database. And the other one is the formatter method that instead takes the value as written in the database and produces the value for the browser, okay? So these two functions do the two translations and can report errors. And what I did is I redefined them in order to do the local to global time translation, okay? And so I can now use this validator in order to perform automatically the conversion between local and UTC time when times are put in the database. Okay, so that's the main thing I'm doing. So you can look at the code and do it. Now, this code is very peculiar to Web2Py, except for this piece, actually. This piece is useful even if you are working in Vue and Ajax. because this plugin, in order to determine the time zone, is globally useful, okay? Okay, so this is what I wanted to mention about the local to global time conversion. Is there any other question at this point, or things that I can tell you? Questions on the homework? How do I get database entries in HTML? Somebody asks. Well, okay, that's a good question. How do you get things from HTML to? Let me try to write some examples, okay? 1 second. So git checkout Vue, okay. Okay. So how do you get information from the database to? No, the rubric is not up in CodeGrader. I still have to finish. You know, there are a few points more. I think the rubric for the homework will be done in about half an hour from when I finish this call. So, okay. Imagine you have a method call in API, and you need to return something to Vue, because Vue is in charge of putting stuff in HTML. So you say get info, get records, okay? And then you can say rows is equal to db db something some table something is greater than 5. You know, whatever your query is, select, okay? And then you can say, for example, the dictionary of results. So the results is an empty list. For row in rows, okay, results append, and here you can append a dictionary that contains what you want. For example, you can say have like a user, and you can say row.username. Okay, and then you can write I don't know, like a quantity row.q and etc. etc. Okay, so this is one of the ways of sending information. At the end, you would do something like return response JSON of my result, which is a list. Okay, that wouldn't be very pretty. So you do dict of something like data is equal to my result. Okay, so because I always want to return a dictionary. Okay, so this would be one way of doing it, right? I have a list of these things. Each one of these things will be translated on the JavaScript side into an object. So I'm returning a list of these objects. Okay. And in the default index.js, I could have a method that says something like, you know, I'm writing it quickly and some pieces are going to be missing, but like self get info is equal to function of, I don't know, for example, nothing. And I can say something like post, okay, let me give a more realistic example. In default, in api.py, right? This can be like a request, request, I don't know, var sex. Just, okay, post to my URL, x is equal to, I don't know, 5. Okay, so this is my value for x. Okay, and then function data. Okay, and here I need to decide what to do with the data, and the data will have an attribute called res, right? And so here I can say self v results, or like, I don't know, product list, whatever it is now, is equal to data.res. Okay? This assumes that I have a variable declared self v product list. Self. Sorry, completely bogus. Just product list. Initialize maybe to the empty list. Okay? And if I have this in the HTML, in the layout, then not in layout, sorry, in what is it, index. Do I have it open? No. Bah. In index, I could write, sorry, I'm looking for the right place. Oh boy. Views, where are the views? Here. Yeah, here I could do something like this, okay, but I could do like div v4 is equal to p in products. Okay, and here I could do, you know, div, I don't know, and I can say p dot user, I don't know, something like this. Because you see, here I have a user field, right? And so this will be part of each object. Then when I go in default index, this product list is set to the results. And so when I go in layout, sorry, when I go in index, this is product list, and this will have the field user, okay? So this is how to go from the database to HTML. When is getinfo being called? When you want. For example, you want to display this at the press of a button. If you want this to be displayed initially, you can put at the end of this, you can say self getinfo. Okay, and this will do an initial call in order to populate the page with some initial information. For the green check mark on save, it is a flash or does it stay on the button? It's a flash. So if you look at how to do flashes, you can do a flash in this way in JavaScript, okay? Let me write a function that does a flash, like self, you know, flash check mark. Okay, how would you do that? Well, various ways. What would be the easiest way? Okay, this is a bit of a brutal way, but var e, var, I don't know, b for my button is equal to button of class post. I don't know, something like that. Okay, so I get my b button, and then I can say if I say b add class. No, actually, I think I can do it better. Sorry, I can have a variable that is called show checkmark, and I can say something like self v show checkmark is equal to false to true. Sorry, like start showing checkmark. Okay, and then I can say set interval. Okay, set interval is a function that takes two parameters, as you see. something to do after some interval and what to do after that interval. So what to do after that interval can be simply self vo show check mark is equal to false. Okay. And the interval can be 1 second. Okay. So if you call this flash check mark, it will show the check mark and then turn it off after 1 second. And then, you know, in the view, we would have to have something like I don't know, button, whatever you have, and then you have an if is equal to show check mark, class is equal to, I don't know, fa check mark. I don't know, you know, there must be an icon for a check mark, and this would cause this check mark to be displayed only when this variable is true. Okay. And I think this would work. And you can read the documentation for this set interval function here. And you can see examples as well. Okay, set interval, you give it a function to be done, and then you give it an interval in milliseconds for doing this function. You know, JavaScript never wants to wait. So here I'm giving what to do. Maybe I should have put a semicolon, but I don't think it matters. I say I give it a function to do and the interval with which to do it. Yeah, this is a mystery. Why don't we never need to call this woodiv show? This is one of the things that that really puzzles me. Actually, I thought we needed to call it, right? So, but it doesn't seem to be the case, and I do not understand why. I think they made I think I don't know the reason, frankly. Logic would tell me that you need to call it, but in practice, things appear on the screen even if you don't. So, you know, I thought that at the end one would have to write something like woodiv, or however I called it, show. But it appears not to be necessary for a reason I don't know. Any reason why stars would stop showing after a search? Yes, because you may not write them to the database correctly. Anything else you would like to ask me about the homework? So again, I will post, you know, the grading criteria as soon as the class is over. Okay, I'll post a poll for the extension so that I will see how many people want it. Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you. So I'll close this talk. I mean, I close this Zoom transmission, and I will upload it. And I will also upload the grading criteria for the homework and also the poll for extension. Okay? Okay, thank you. Bye.